Hey, and welcome to another web platform feature of the week. And as you can see, this week again, I'm featuring the amazing folks of OpenWebDocs. Again, this is something I started doing last week, and it's just a way to highlight some projects, people, organizations that I think is doing critical work in the web platform space that I want to personally recognize, introduce to you if you do not know about them already, and tell you why you should support them. So if you care about places like MD and WebDocs and you really want good documentation for the web platform, then you have to support the people of OpenWebDocs. They do a bulk of the work that's being done on MD and WebDocs in terms of the documentation that is published there. I want to be clear that there are people at Mozilla, good friends of mine, people that I used to work with and that I have a ton of respect for, that is doing great work. I don't take anything away from them. But I also want to highlight OpenWebDocs as a non-profit. They rely on companies and people to support them so that they can continue to do this important work. So if you are in a position where you can donate, I would highly encourage that you do that, and you can find a donate button right on their website. You can read their impact report and learn more about them on openwebdocs.org. So thank you so much, and thank you OpenWebDocs for what you do. And with that, let's dive into this week's feature. So this week's feature is closest, which is a JavaScript function. But then we're also going to more broadly talk about this idea of event delegation and how closest actually plays nice with event delegation. So let's look at one of the common problems you're likely to run into. So here we have 3 buttons. I'm going to show you the HTML real quick. So we have a container, and then we have 3 of these icon buttons that each contains an SVG. And the one thing we can do, of course, is we can attach an event handler to each individual button. But we'll talk about why that is sometimes a good idea, but why event delegation might, in situations like this and similar situations, be an improvement in terms of code maintenance, but also potentially performance. And there's also other benefits, especially if this content is dynamic. So you can imagine maybe you're adding and removing fruits, and as you're adding and removing things, you don't have to rebind and remove event listeners. You have one that handles everything. And the way it does that is most events in JavaScript bubble, which means the event happens and the event walks up the tree. And so, sure, the event that triggered, the element that triggered the event could handle the event itself, but it could also delegate that to something higher up in the DOM tree, the document object model, to handle the event. And that is then what event delegation is. It's basically this element saying, I'm going to not handle my event. I'm going to just let it bubble, and I'm going to delegate the event handling to something higher up in the tree. Now, if we look at this, and then here's the JavaScript code, right now what it does is it says if the target, so the thing that triggered the event, if it has a tag name of button. So if it's a button, then output the text content that it reads from a data attribute. So the data attribute that it reads it from is called value. So again, if we look at the HTML, we'll see it has this data value, and for example, grapes, apple, and strawberry. So there's a little output container here into which we will write the content of this attribute. So now if we click on it, oh, it's not working. Why isn't it working? But if I click really far down here, now it works. So why is this happening? So the reason this happens is because right now what we're saying is, if the thing that triggered the event is a button, do a thing. So we're clicking on the button, but we're not getting the event. And that is because the SVG, or one of the paths inside the SVG, is actually generating the event. And so we have 2 ways that we can solve this. The one is in CSS, and you could do this. You can, for example, say, anytime I have a button, anything inside that button, I'm going to say pointer events none, which tells the browser these things should now not generate events. So now if I click, it works. You can click anywhere in this button and it works. But the thing is, this might have unintended consequences, because maybe you turn off all the events, but actually you wanted some things to trigger events, or who knows, but there might be a reason why this is not the way you want to go. So how can we fix it with this, with JavaScript, and use it closest? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, our buttons have this class called icon button. Now, instead of doing this, we're going to use closest. And so what we will do is we will say, let's first do it like this. Closest and icon, oops, need to put this in a string, icon button, right? So this alone is not going to work simply because of our output. So this works in terms of that it will catch, the path or the SVG will trigger it, it'll walk up and see, does it have a parent that has this class? It will find it, but now it's going to try to read the dataset value off of the target, and the target might be something else, right? So what we can do is one of two things. We can either say, store this. Let's do that. So we'll do, so let's do, instead of target, let's do this. Event dot, and then we'll just say button. Let's be really not verbose. So if button, so if we found a button, then we know the data set's supposed to be on that. And now, no matter where we click, it works, right? As long as we click on the button, of course. We click here, nothing happens. But as long as we click on the button, we're always going to get, our event is going to be delegated and handled by our button. So that's how closest works. And that's why it's really nice to use in combination with event delegation. Now let's see some other ways we can use it. So now we're going to look at this UI. So here we have a much more complex UI. And in fact, most of this is built with JavaScript, and we'll walk through that. But we basically have our available to watch titles, which is the ones we can see right now. And they're being put in an unordered list. And then we have our watch list. That is another unordered list. Both are empty. Then we just have a template here, which we're going to use to build our individual list items. And then this is all in a custom element called Media Planner. And then we have our JavaScript. So if you think about it, we have 5 elements. And so we have 5 buttons. So we could attach an event handler to each one of those. But now when I click add, it adds our element to our watch list. And it has a button that will remove it. So that means whenever we add items, we need to bind an event to each individual one. And then we remove them, right? What if I tell you we can have one event listener right at the top of Media Planner, and it can handle all the events for us by delegating the events up from the add or the remove button. Let's walk through it. So here's just our array of our movies. And then let's look at what's interesting. So we have our constructor, and then, so first things first, show available. That just nothing interesting here yet for us. We map over all media to get our available media. And basically what this does is get media entry, and this uses that template that I mentioned, and it builds up each of these. And you will see here that here's our media entry button, but we're not attaching an event listener to it. Here, we're not attaching an event listener to each one of these at all. We're not doing that. So once we have now done all of them, we append them, and that's then what we see here. And then we have an add to watch list, and it basically just clones, then moves it over, and it makes some changes. Like you can see here, it takes the inner HTML, it replaces add with remove. But again, there's nothing here. It adds a remove item data attribute that it sets to true, which means this button is now removes items as opposed to adding items. But again, no event listeners yet. Here's a remove that calls entry.remove, and this is literally, we give it an entry and we remove it. This is remove function I'm using here is from the Web API. This isn't a function that I've written here. You can see I can't command click it. So we're just giving it the DOM element and say remove it. And so no event handlers yet. So now if we keep scrolling, here's our event handlers. And lure, we have this, which is our custom element. And we're adding an event listener for click events. And now we get our target. And then we want to match on an action button. So now we're saying whenever an event happens, find the closest element with the class media action button. Now, right now, we won't have a problem with something inside the button triggering the event. But if we choose to add little icons in here, then again, not a problem. Because even if the event is triggered by, for example, an SVG or one of the paths inside the SVG of this icon, we will go up and see if we can find a parent with this class, right? But we are also using media entry, which of course, if we go up here, we can see here, media entry. So this is our individual list items. Right, so this is our complete item. So a little poster, movie poster, plus our button. So it's the entire thing that we're adding. Instead of doing it like that, I can just show you by inspecting it. So here we can see media entry, right? It's the whole thing. So it's the image plus the button. So that is what we are matching here. And again, we're looking at our target. So no matter what our target was, we're walking up and saying, do you have a parent with that class? And of course, this happened either inside the button or the button itself. It's going to bubble up, doop, and it's going to catch it. So we're saying if we found an action button, so target.closest was able to find something, then get the container, get the media entry. And now we're going to say, what is the action that we want to execute? And so remember, we have that data attribute that we're setting. So we're saying if the action button has a data attribute called remove item, then we want to call remove from watch list. If not, we want to call add to watch list, right? And then we just execute the action. So one of those will be our action, and we execute it. And that's it. Now, as we add and remove things, we don't have to mess with any additional binding or removing event listeners at all. Everything will just keep working dynamically. We can add all of them. We can remove in any order that we want. It keeps working, right? We can, of course, add duplicates. We want to watch the movie twice, but I haven't built anything for that. But of course, you can do that because this is just your arrays. This has nothing to do with your event listener. Your event listener is just executing a function when it's triggered. You still have to then do the work to see, do I already have an element like this? Yes, then don't add it again, that kind of thing. But in terms of, but you can see it always acts on the correct one. It's not removing both the Spider-Man ones, right? It's only removing the one that we've now sent as an element. So here we get our media item, and that's what we pass to, for example, remove. So it's getting the correct entry to remove from the DOM. So that is the benefit of using event delegation, and that is how Closest can make it so much better to work in this whole event delegation thing without having to go into your CSS and then disable pointer events, and maybe down the road, like you run into this weird bug and you're like, why is this happening? Why am I not getting an event? And it's because somewhere in your CSS you've turned off pointer events. So yeah, I kind of forgot about this function. It's something that back in the jQuery days was done quite a lot. And I relatively recently discovered Closest, and I was like, my goodness. And then started using it more and more, and I felt like I just had to bring it into this edition of the newsletter. So I hope you found this interesting. If you didn't know about Closest and you're like, whoa, this is going to change a lot of things for me, let me know in the comments how you're going to put this to work for you. If you've used it before and you have some thoughts about it, some specific use cases where you find it to be particularly useful, again, share with me and with the rest of the people in the comments. I would love to hear it. And until the next time, keep rocking the free web, and keep making the web more and more accessible and fun and weird. And until the next one, I'll see you soon. Bye. Peace.